Ava ignored the stinging, bloodied flesh around her wrists. The heavy metal cuffs were the least of her worries now. Displayed like livestock upon the town square's makeshift auction block, she stared blankly at the dirt, tracking the long, hungry shadows of the bidders pacing below. "Next item!" roared the merchant, shattering the dawn's quiet. "Female, 22, reads and follows orders." A brutal hand jerked her jaw skyward. "Good bite, healthy joints. A little skin and bones, but fatten her up and she's prime." Heat rushed to her face in utter shame, yet she remained perfectly still. Struggling would just earn her a beating. That was a bitter truth hammered into her the night rival wolves slaughtered her entire family. Fighters died. Runts became property. Being painfully average meant surviving just long enough to be sold into slavery. "Opening at 50 silver coins," the trader shouted. A heavy, suffocating quiet immediately fell over the crowd. To these people, 50 silver pieces was an absolute fortune. They treated her like invisible trash, rolling their eyes at the steep price. She was far too malnourished and emotionally shattered to fetch a premium rate. 30 silver, the man amended, sounding nervous. A couple of gruff onlookers shuffled forward, eyeing her up and down. They wore predatory, dead expressions. She read their dark intentions perfectly. Wash the floors, till the dirt, die quietly. Her chest pounded fiercely, yet she maintained a calm, measured rhythm of breath. "She has medical skills," the merchant pleaded, clearly panicking. "Knows remedies, fixes fractures, helps deliver pups." Cruel chuckles rippled through the onlookers, twisting her gut into tight knots. "Shifters heal themselves, you idiot," a random bystander yelled. "I'm not spending coin on useless garbage." 20 silver, a harsh, raspy snarl echoed. Absolute terror turned her veins to ice. A massive, heavily disfigured brute swaggered up. His rotting grin and massive fists promised nothing but agony. Under his vile stare, her miserable destiny played out. Endless toil, constant abuse, and existing only as a punching bag. 20 silver from Mr. Gareth, the trader sighed, tension leaving his shoulders. "Can anyone do 25? Utter stillness answered him. The scarred brute smirked, casually flicking metal pieces in his palm. 15, the thug bargained, treating her worse than dirt. "She's practically a corpse, won't survive the first freeze." The merchant scowled. "Please, sir, 15 or I cancel." 15 or I'm gone," the brute barked. She shut her eyelids tightly, bracing for hell. She prayed that blind obedience and total silence might somehow spare her from his wrath. "You can't bid 15, the seller whined. "Nobody else wants her, pal. Face the facts," the thug snapped back. Whatever excuse the trader had evaporated, as an electric shockwave of dread paralyzed the square. Deep inside, her inner beast began pacing, smelling a new threat. It tasted of pure, terrifying dominance, blending instantly with the collective terror radiating from the bystanders. Goosebumps erupted along her arms. Her primal nature demanded she bow down and cower before this newly arrived apex predator. The atmosphere grew so dense and suffocating with sheer commanding energy that her skeleton literally throbbed. Every single voice was instantly snuffed out. Chuckles died in throats, and fussy toddlers went completely mute. "Your Majesty," a terrified voice murmured into the void. "The Alpha King," another gasped in denial. Forgetting every single submissive habit she owned, the young woman peeked upward. Villagers scrambled out of the way, hitting the dirt as a wildly lethal silhouette stalked down the center path. Pale as a ghost, the man on the stage clutched his wooden stand, fingers shaking violently. That was when she finally spotted him. 100 gold coins. The tone was lethal, smooth, and brutally absolute. Her vision widened in pure shock, staring helplessly at the terrifying male demanding such profound deference. Deep within, her spirit animal groveled and cried out in defeat, while her conscious brain short-circuited. He radiated an entirely different caliber of existence, intimidatingly huge, with raven strands framing a chiseled, merciless jawline. He wore incredibly expensive, tailored, battle-ready gear. Wealthy enough to buy nations, yet too dangerous to care about showing off. The Alpha King. Her legs turned to jelly. His identity was unmistakable. His dark legend was universal. The merciless warlord who shattered the northern territories. A tyrant who forged his empire out of blood and corpses. Why on earth was he looking at a worthless runaway? 100 gold coins? The merchant stuttered blindly. Sire, are you sure? Are you questioning your ruler? The monarch's deadly, freezing tone left absolutely no room for debate, suffocating the plaza with unquestionable dominance. All color drains from Gareth's visage. Sire, I staked my right first. You possessed nothing. Amber irises sweep over the quivering coward with effortless contempt. Get out. The lesser wolf basically sprints out of the bazaar, his previous arrogance burning off like fog in the morning sun. The royal ruler climbs the auction block, instantly making the entire area seem suffocatingly tight. At this proximity, the sheer dominance radiating from his frame is almost visible to Ava. It extends far beyond mere muscle into a raw, ancient energy. He examines her through those unnerving amber depths, keeping his features completely impassive. Your trade is medicine. That statement completely startles her. Considering every horrible motive for purchasing her, this was unexpected. Indeed, sire, she murmurs, barely trusting her own ears. The seniors of the Lunar Blossom clan taught me. I understand botany, resetting fractures, and delivering pups. Optimism beats violently against her ribs. Perhaps this exact expertise prompted her rescue. Could he actually appreciate her craft instead of viewing her as disposable flesh? Excellent, he states flatly before pivoting around. Rowan. An imposing fighter advances, keeping his mutilated features strictly neutral. My liege. Transport the girl to the stronghold. Ensure she receives a meal and a bath. He marches off without sparing her another glance, having thoroughly erased her from his current focus. Hold on, the captive yells, stepping closer. Sire, let me prove. A heavy grip seizes her collarbone, halting her momentum entirely. First regulation, the guard murmurs, projecting the absolute command of a seasoned enforcer. Never talk to the sovereign ruler unless he specifically initiates the conversation. Second mandate. Absolutely no eye contact. You belong to him now, little one. An expensive asset, yet still an object. Those harsh truths strike like a thrown punch, though she manages a hollow bob of her head. Silver lining? She will not die under a whip on Gareth's plantation. Someone actually deemed her medical talent worth purchasing. Above all, she survives. While her escort guides her from the slave block, the young woman snags a final look at the royal's vanishing back. He rescued her. The motivation might lack compassion, yet he still pulled her from hell. If the man requires a physician, she vows to become the absolute greatest medic in his realm. Failure isn't an option. It remains her sole lifeline. Chapter 1. Their trek toward the sovereign domain spans an eternity of wilderness. The captives' naked souls, already sensitive from prolonged imprisonment, rupture upon the jagged alpine stones. Encircling her position, the royal guard travels with liquid agility, seamlessly transitioning from bipedal to lupine shapes whenever the landscape requires it. Memory fails when recalling her own last transformation. Endless malnutrition forced her inner beast into a sickly hibernation, shoved so far down that connecting with it feels impossible. Pathetic bottom feeder, a fighter grumbles, drawing cruel chuckles from the rest of the unit. His Majesty blew good coin on trash. We ought to have tossed her to the scavengers, a second guard chimes in. That mockery burns worse than the open wounds on her heels. The auction pens held viler insults, yet this nonchalant rejection wounds her profoundly. These soldiers represent her savior. If his own troops consider her garbage, did the monarch make a massive mistake? Perhaps transforming isn't her purpose, her handler states roughly. A tiny spark of relief ignites within her sternum. A medic provides alternate advantages, such as, the soldier's snicker is hideous. Medicine is for fragile runts unable to endure agony. True shifters regenerate naturally. "Or they perish," a different guy tosses in with dark glee. Nature's way of culling the weak. The girl's gut twists into tight knots. Surviving seems impossible when the royal elite view her profession with such disgust. Day 3 brings total physical collapse. Gravity shifts abruptly, sending her crashing into the dust while her surroundings blur into a dizzying spin. Derisive snorts echo around her as her trembling arms buckle during a desperate attempt to stand. "Predictable failure," a voice scoffs. "The fragile runt cannot even manage a simple hike." "Abandon the dead weight," somebody else recommends. "She's delaying our progress." Piercing through the foggy fatigue, heavy footsteps approach her prone form. She tenses up, anticipating a brutal strike or violent pull, fully accustomed to everyday cruelty. Rather than pain, surprisingly tender limbs scoop her off the gravel. An intoxicating aroma strikes immediately. Evergreen mixed with a metallic tang and an untamed essence that violently awakens her dormant inner beast. Recognition dawns on her regarding her carrier, and pure astonishment violently empties her windpipe. The sovereign ruler cradles her fragile frame as though she were completely weightless. He scaled the deadly, jagged trail with unshakable confidence, his enormous body moving flawlessly. Restrained muscle rippled beneath her, his gentle readjustments ensuring she stayed securely cradled against his chest. Her quiet regrets went entirely ignored. Still, he bore her weight upward while his soldiers trailed behind, dropping into a hushed, reverent quiet. Peeking through heavy, fluttering lashes, their stronghold materialized through the thick fog. A jagged sanctuary of dark obsidian, violently hewn straight from the cliffside. Instead of a sanctuary, it resembled an aggressive blade piercing the heavens, with jagged spires grasping at the overcast heavens like monstrous talons. Stepping beyond the colossal iron doors, dread settled in her gut. The sprawling grounds immediately validated her absolute worst terrors. Fighters trained with lethal precision, while guttural growls and ringing steel reverberated across the masonry. That brutal nature bled into the youth. Toddlers wore vicious glares, swinging mock timber blades in deadly martial stances. Joy was entirely absent here. A suffocating pressure of imminent bloodshed hung heavily in the atmosphere. Ava decided this fortress was utterly devoid of even a sliver of happiness. Setting her carefully upon the cobblestones, the royal flagged down a scowling maiden. Yet before that servant could whisk her off, a razor-sharp tone sliced through the tense quiet. "A pleasant return, dear nephew." That silky greeting dripped with an absolutely chilling, venomous undertone. An imposing fighter stepped close, sharing such striking features with the ruler they mirrored siblings. Yet advanced years and sheer malice warped his visage. Those colorless irises swept over Ava, studying her like a pile of decaying carrion. "This is your bought physician?" he questioned, his mocking inflection broadcasting total disdain for the acquisition. "Yes, Uncle Craven," the monarch answered, carrying an odd ring of submission that genuinely shocked her. The older man sneered with revulsion. "And you paraded her in your arms before the whole territory." That grim-looking female, obviously lowly staff, yanked hard on her sleeve, desperate to drag her clear of the explosive animosity brewing between them. Nevertheless, those following muttered syllables reached her ears perfectly, echoing sharply across the paved masonry. "Our people scrutinize your every move, every single frailty. We simply cannot tolerate fragility after shedding blood for our terrifying status." "Her legs gave out," the Alpha argued. "She possesses zero strength," the Elder interrupted sharply. "Now everyone witnessed you babying a frail creature. Imagine our rivals catching wind of such pathetic behavior." Fingers dug painfully into Ava's bicep as the maid practically hauled her indoors. "That man is Craven," she hissed frantically. "Second in command and royal kin. For your own survival, desperately hope he wipes your very existence from his memory." Swallowed by the stronghold's gloom, she easily detected those alphas continuing their hushed, dangerously heated dispute. Chapter 2. 21 days vanished inside those walls, forcing Ava to master their brutal daily routine. Morning broke with ringing steel outdoors, accompanied by aggressive growls as shifters viciously challenged each other's dominance. Noon featured maids rushing down rocky passages, maintaining the colossal keep via quiet, flawless operation. Dusk meant battered soldiers hobbling homeward, stubbornly enduring agonizing injuries that a magical touch would have instantly mended. Yet nobody requested aid. She polished stones and stoked flames instead, quietly appreciating the guaranteed food and cozy sheets her slavery provided. That alone vastly exceeded her wildest dreams back on the trading stage. Labor proved grueling, yet decent. Enduring zero physical abuse felt like a rare privilege she had entirely forsaken. Nevertheless, witnessing constant torment shredded her soul. Spotting a junior fighter agonizing over a sparring trauma, his joint, visibly popped from its socket, broke her. Gliding near with soothing intentions and magic radiating from her fingertips, he violently flinched as if handed pure venom. "Back the hell off," he growled, slamming himself into the masonry. "Keep your pathetic tricks away." "I can fix it," she pleaded softly. "Fix it?" He hissed the offer like dark magic. "True predators recover naturally or perish. That brutality fuels our absolute power." Commotion attracted onlookers. Fellow packmates swarmed around them, expressions contorted with deep revulsion, as though she had performed ultimate heresy. An elite guard shoved through the mob, his violently marred features radiating absolute fury. "Explain your actions, runt," he barked out. "She's pushing that restorative garbage on Denis," a bystander shouted loudly. "Medicine equals cowardice," a second voice chimed in. "Real alphas bleed." The veteran locked an icy, threatening glare onto her. "You are slave labor, not a medic. Know your rank, bottom feeder." Humiliation scorched her face during her withdrawal, yet utter bewilderment flared significantly brighter. Purchasing a mere maid wouldn't warrant inquiries about her restorative magic. So why had the monarch bothered? Dropping 100 gold pieces on a scullery maid made 0 sense. This baffling routine continued for days, highlighting itself when a cook severely scalded her palm on a boiling kettle. Stepping up to mend the blistered flesh only earned Ava a vicious scolding for rewarding incompetence. Later, a sentry's laceration began rotting dangerously. Yet her offers to cure the infection sparked a harsh tirade, claiming true shifters never babied trivial injuries. Every single refusal slowly shattered her remaining optimism. Perhaps her assumptions were entirely flawed, and the royal simply wanted an accurate inventory of his purchase, rather than actually utilizing her gifts. Yet that failed to explain why he had carried her up the treacherous peaks, showing a lowly slave such unforeseen tenderness. That blazing mystery devoured her from the inside out, until her breaking point arrived. Her perfect opening, his tone held that exact icy dominance that had chilled her during the slave market bidding. Yet underneath the frost lay a profound exhaustion that made her chest tighten with sudden empathy. This was the deciding second. She desperately needed answers. Gripping her dusty cloth, she drifted into their path and murmured his title, instantly silencing the entire room. The surrounding councilman whipped around, glaring at her with visceral disgust and absolute astonishment. His amber gaze swept over her frame for a fraction of a second before dismissing her like dirt. As she pushed to ask her question, a furious bark cut her off. A red-faced official stomped closer, spitting that lowly thralls had zero right to speak directly to the pack's supreme ruler. Panic pushed her pitch higher as she frantically argued her status as a medical practitioner. Insisting she was purchased for her magical aid, she was immediately silenced by the nobles sneering that she was utterly worthless and must remain mute until ordered otherwise. Materializing out of thin air, Rowan seized her collarbone with a grip tight enough to leave vicious bruises. "Forgive this disruption, Your Majesty. The low-ranking wolf has forgotten her station. Ensure her absolute obedience moving forward," the ruler commanded like ice, strolling away without sparing her another glance. Crushing disappointment swallowed her whole, while Rowan hauled her down the hall, his endless rant regarding protocol blurring into meaningless static. Suffocating anger expanded in her lungs. If her magic was truly forbidden here, why keep her completely in the dark? Why maintain such a twisted illusion that her abilities held any value to this pack? However, the following dawn violently shifted her reality. While clearing debris from the sparring grounds, a nauseating crunch of shattering limbs split the air. A preteen, barely 12 years old, slammed hard into the dirt during airborne maneuvers, his shin bent backward grotesquely. The youth attempted to rise, but crumbled instantly with an agonizing shriek, while the surrounding fighters simply observed with stony apathy. That was the werewolf doctrine. Agony forged resilience, and torture bred dominance. Craven sauntered toward the casualty, a wicked gleam dancing in his icy gaze. "Absolutely worthless," the instructor mocked, snatching the kid's injured limb and wrenching it brutally until a fresh fracture echoed. "Behold the face of frailty, the very disease we eradicate from our ranks." As the child's raw wail bounced across the masonry, an invisible leash shattered inside her mind, bypassing all rational thought. Tossing aside the terrifying repercussions and the 100 strict regulations dictating her captivity, she sprinted forward. "Enough!" ripped violently from her vocal cords as she slid into the dirt next to the victim. Luminescent magic flared to life around her fingers immediately, channeling a soothing heat straight into his ruined anatomy. His hysterical weeping faded into sniffles as the fractured skeleton fused perfectly and shredded tissues stitched themselves whole, realigning the mangled appendage flawlessly. As the radiant light faded, the pup stared up in bewildered awe, treating her compassion like a completely foreign dialect, before Craven's lethal bark slashed the quiet atmosphere. Peering upward, she met the instructor's murderously distorted features, while over his massive shoulder, the monarch advanced with terrifyingly calm, deadpan strides. "Your new plaything spits on our sacred traditions," the brute snarled venomously, insisting her medical intervention had preserved the exact cowardice they sought to purge, demanding immediate execution of justice. Halting right beside the trio, the Sovereign's amber irises meticulously analyzed the situation. The youngster pushed himself upright effortlessly on his fully restored limb, leaving his savior planted in the dust with sparkling remnants of magic tracing her knuckles. A typical low-born wolf would have immediately hit the dirt, groveling for mercy and swearing complete obedience for eternity. Instead, she tilted her head high, locking onto the royal stare without blinking, wordlessly challenging him to penalize true compassion, while a faint twitch in his jaw betrayed his reaction to her blatant rebellion. A thick, electric silence hangs heavy between them for a split second. "A mended pup serves us better," he states flatly. "He'll be back on the training grounds faster." Craven punches the closest stone wall. "Nephew," he snarls, "you cannot silence." The monarch unleashes his raw, dominant aura, forcing every single fighter in the yard to visibly cower. "Never challenge my word." While the sentries march Ava inside, Craven's acidic glare practically sears her spine. Yet the ruler's face is what truly lingers in her thoughts. That fleeting second, his icy facade cracked, revealing a hint of what looked like genuine appreciation. Chapter 3. A strange new atmosphere settles over the pack in the days following the courtyard standoff. Ava tackles her chores with fresh drive, anticipating someone, anyone, to request the medical care their leader had just endorsed. His public defense of her actions in front of everyone absolutely guaranteed a shift in their customs. Here was her chance to demonstrate that his 100 gold bought more than a simple maid. He occupies her thoughts far too often. She keeps recalling his amber gaze, studying the recovered pup, projecting a guarded stoicism that whispered of quiet praise. He backed her intervention instead of taking the easy route and agreeing with his furious relative. It must have held some significance, yet nobody approaches her. The fighters continue to lick their wounds in hard-headed secrecy. Even the domestic staff continue treating their gashes as embarrassing flaws meant to be concealed. A single sovereign decree cannot erase generations of glorified agony. Regardless, Ava stubbornly holds on to her optimism. Perhaps patience is all she needs. Later, following dinner, a brisk, commanding rapping strikes her bedroom door. An unfamiliar sentry waits in the corridor, his face completely devoid of emotion. "Follow me," he orders flatly. Putting aside her sewing, Ava questions, "Where to?" "Our alpha demands your presence." Her brain spins through countless scenarios. Perhaps he requires her specific skills. He might wish to strategize her medical role within the community. Or worse, she is facing punishment. Her unshod toes pad softly across the freezing masonry, ascending a spiral staircase leading directly to the sovereign's quarters. The sentry pauses outside gigantic wooden double doors and raps his knuckles, leaving Ava wiping her clammy, terrified hands. "Come in." Opulent fabrics drape the stone, while a massive fireplace, big enough to cook a stag whole, blazes intensely. It acts as a hidden refuge from the brutal shifter society. Then, outlined by the roaring flames, stands the pack leader. Stripped of his regal garments, he wears basic black clothing that ironically amplifies his lethal aura. Flickering orange light paints shifting silhouettes over his strikingly chiseled face. Those piercing amber irises lock onto hers briefly, prompting her to quickly remember her place and stare at the rugs. The room goes dead quiet, amplifying her frantic heartbeat to a level she knows his wolf senses can detect. "Dismissed," he commands the soldier. The man inclines his head and backs out, sealing the heavy wood shut. Just the two of them now. Staring rigidly at her toes, Ava catalogues every inhale and rustle. The mute tension drags on until it shatters her nerves. "You summoned me, Your Highness?" "Correct." He speaks in an unprecedentedly quiet tone, though it still drips with absolute command regarding the earlier public spectacle. Nausea rolls through her. "Sire, You meant it imperfectly," he cuts in, his footsteps closing the distance between them. That kid is fit for combat by morning. A massive wave of tension leaves her body, immediately replaced by total bewilderment. Why the icy detachment if he isn't furious? "I appreciate that, sire. I merely intended to aid him. Yet our kind does not operate this way." His pitch drops into the freezing, authoritative growl she recalls from the bidding block. "In this pack, true power is forged in agony. Pushing past broken bones proves a fighter's value. You stole his opportunity and humiliated him." His accusation strikes her like a punch to the gut. "Sire, I'm completely lost. You stood up for me out there. I was just arguing for efficiency." The Alpha's proximity was suffocating, a dizzying wave of body heat laced with sharp pine and cold metal. Beneath it lay a feral edge that sent her inner Omega into a submissive frenzy. A recovered fighter gets back on the battlefield quicker. "That hardly implies I endorse how it's done." Ava curled her fingers tightly against her thighs. Her biology roared at her to yield and blindly swallow his commands. This was the reigning sovereign, the apex predator of their entire domain. Whatever he decreed became absolute truth. Yet a strange undercurrent in his tone contradicted his harsh stance. A subtle hesitation seemed to bleed through. "I know this defies your traditions, sire," she murmured cautiously, finally summoning the courage to meet his gaze. "But certainly prolonged agony isn't always required. Letting fighters die from easily curable wounds makes terrible strategic sense." A muscle feathered in his clenched jaw. For a split second, an unmasked emotion, perhaps ancient grief or dormant fury, flashed across his face. His next words were softly spoken, dripping with the weight of the past. "My original pack was massacred during my childhood." That confession rippled through the tense air like a boulder dropped in a glass pond. "We were naive and welcomed outsiders. Our philosophy centered on compassion, aiding the vulnerable, and framing vulnerability as bravery." Molten gold irises bored directly into her soul. That idealism left us fragile and blind. When the ambush hit, we were slaughtered like cattle. A gasp escaped Ava's lips. The tragic picture painted itself in her mind. A terrified child watching his home turn to ash, realizing that charity was a death sentence. "My uncle pulled me from the wreckage," he went on, his tone turning to granite. "Just him and a few stragglers. We made a blood oath to never repeat that fatal error. Only absolute power mattered. We vowed to eliminate any vulnerability a rival could target." He closed the distance between them, his dominant aura suffocating the space. "Are we clear?" The crushing pressure of his alpha command slammed into her, coercing her compliance and forcing a surrender. Yet beneath that dictatorial roar, she detected the lingering cries of a traumatized orphan. "Understood, sire," she breathed out. Her soul ached for the boy he was, even as her own spirit fractured. He scrutinized her features intensely, and a subtle transformation softened his harsh scowl. A fleeting shadow of remorse, or maybe just hesitation. "Your powers will be reserved strictly for life-or-death situations," he finally conceded, the compromise clearly bruising his pride. "Only when a fighter is actively bleeding out, never for superficial scrapes our biology can handle." Ava's gaze shot up, a defiant spark of optimism igniting in her ribcage. It fell short of her ultimate goal, yet it was a start, an opportunity to make a difference, however scarce. "I am grateful, Alpha," she exhaled sharply while sinking into a respectful curtsy. "I accept these terms." Pivoting toward the exit, her brain spun with the new boundaries. Critical scenarios only. That was a workable compromise. She could... Ava. His deep rumble anchoring her name froze her in her tracks. Whipping around, a hot blush crept up her neck as the heavy privacy of the room finally registered. Just the two of them in his private quarters, bathed in flickering hearth flames. His impenetrable emotional armor was finally fracturing. "Yes, sire?" "Steer clear of my uncle." The caution was murmured but deadly earnest. "Craven views your magic as a threat, not an asset. Keep yourself off his radar." "Oh," she replied, bizarrely let down by the sudden pivot away from their fragile connection. "I will heed your warning, Alpha." Bowing once more, she bolted out the door to prevent her mouth from ruining things, her face scorched by a mysterious flush. Over the ensuing week, Ava did her best to stick to his strict parameters. Whenever a guard stumbled by nursing an aching joint or a fresh gash, she clamped her luminous hands together behind her spine and averted her eyes. That resolve shattered the morning a juvenile female crashed terribly during Sky Tactics training. Her shin snapped completely, white bone slicing right through the muscle. A crimson puddle expanded rapidly under her thrashing body. The girl shrieked in pure torment, and Ava's medical instincts flared. The child was going to succumb to blood loss in minutes. This was a catastrophe. The exact loophole the king provided. Ava lunged forward. Brilliant light erupted from her palms as she slid to her knees, flooding the ruined limb with pure, restorative magic. Fractured marrow aligned, torn tissues fused back together, and the epidermis closed flawlessly. The recruit's piercing cries dissolved into baffled panting, eventually falling completely silent as she gaped at her unblemished calf. "What is the meaning of this?" Craven's furious bark echoed over the dirt arena. Ava whipped her head up to see the uncle marching closer, his icy gaze burning with hostility. "Once more, this bottom-tier mutt disrespects our ancient laws," he roared to the stunned spectators. "Her fragility is rotting our pack from the inside." While the tirade echoes, her gaze flicks upward, catching the royal lichen observing from the high terrace. For a fleeting second, their gazes entangle, and the raw emotion in his stare steals the air right from her lungs. Validation. Contentment. Buried beneath the stoic exterior burns a profound, fiery admiration that completely transcends mere tactical value. The sovereign is genuinely pleased. Ignoring his previous lectures on pack traditions, his relatives' blistering outrage, and the threat to his own sovereign image, he actually reveres her actions. A jolt of clarity strikes her core, bringing sudden enlightenment. The true battle goes far deeper than the friction between her restorative gifts and their brutal customs. It is a war tearing at the monarch himself, pitting a lifetime of savage conditioning against the genuine emotions stirring within his chest. Perhaps she isn't the sole soul evolving in this fortress. Chapter 4. 7 days later, roused by the deafening rhythm of marching footsteps, she slips among the castle staff gathered along the ramparts to witness the royal army mobilizing below. "What's happening out here?" she questions a rushing servant. The woman shoots back a baffled stare. Utterly stunned, she even has to ask, "Are you living under a rock? Our sovereign rides out for war this morning." A massive legion of combatants swamps the lower training grounds. Half stand bipedal, clad in polished steel, while the rest have taken their feral shapes. Towering, monstrous predators glaring with molten fire. Commanding the vanguard astride an obsidian warhorse, the monarch looks imposing in pitch-black plating molded to his lethal physique. His booming speech echoes across the yard, preaching unyielding might and glory. The battalion answers him with a deafening symphony of battle cries and feral bays. She lingers there until the final soldier fades over the horizon, her chest weighed down by a strange, unnameable ache. Over the ensuing days, the departure of the monarch's suffocating aura sparks an unforeseen shift within the castle walls. It starts quietly. A scullery worker timidly corners her one afternoon, nursing a badly scorched palm. "Help me, I beg you," the young woman murmurs, frantically checking the hallways. "The agony is blinding, and the head chef threatened to toss me on the streets if I slack off." Without a second thought, the healer mends the injured flesh, witnessing pure salvation wash over the worker's features. Whispers weave rapidly through the lower decks. The strange outsider has the power to cure, and she never turns anyone away. A steady stream of patients follows. A battered stable hand, a tailor whose hands are shredded from frantic sewing, a sentinel nursing a festering gash. Every magical mend is minor, nowhere near the life or death crises the royal decree mandated. Yet faced with their pleading, terrified eyes, refusing them feels utterly impossible. Beyond that, denying them would mean ignoring the vibrant life her gifts breathe into the estate. The household staff actually starts to smile freely. Soft, joyful chuckles now float down the previously somber hallways. Pups who used to cower in the shadows run wild through the gardens, their cheerful shrieks bouncing off ramparts that have been starved of happiness for decades. This gentle revolution creeps outward. Battle-hardened wolves who observe her miracles gradually abandon their brutal, unforgiving methods. An instructor notorious for trampling collapsed trainees actually reaches down to pull them up. The very stones of the keep feel as if they've exhaled a sigh of relief. Once dominated solely by the harsh ring of steel and barking commanders, the estate now resonates with sweet melodies spilling from the main dining hall. Peaceful chatter fills the manicured lawns while she navigates her new life with soaring self-assurance, her radiant magic warming every inch of the royal territory. She finally has a purpose in this place. Her presence is absolutely vital. Not since being dragged onto the trading stage has her spirit felt this vibrant. Yet, a nagging shadow remains. How will the sovereign react upon his arrival? Would he recognize the beautiful harmony she had cultivated? Or would he just see the very fragility his elder raged against? Her answer arrives violently, dead in the middle of a pitch-black night, exactly 3 weeks later. Blaring trumpets rip her from sleep. These aren't the glorious fanfares of conquest, but the frantic, shrieking alarms of utter disaster. Tossing a heavy mantle over her shoulders, she sprints into the chilly air, pulse hammering as she plunges into the panicked mob swarming the lower bailey. A trio of horsemen crashes through the iron portcullis, their monstrous mounts practically foaming at the mouth from sheer exhaustion. At the forefront rides the monarch, his dark plating crushed and stained crimson, while his striking amber gaze burns with unhinged panic. "Bring her to me," the lichen ruler bellows, the sheer force of his voice rattling the plaza. "Where the hell is my healer?" "Right beside you," she shouts back, shoving past the terrified onlookers. "I am right here, Your Majesty." Instant salvation washes over his bloody visage at the sight of her. Standing chest to chest, the sheer fatigue carved into his jawline is undeniable, alongside the terrifying tremor in his usually steady, lethal hands. "It's the elder," he chokes out, his gravelly tone fracturing with raw grief. "He is fading fast." Laced, silvered steel tore right through him. His inner beast is failing against the toxins, and he'll never endure the transport back to these walls. "What is our distance?" she demands, intuitively sensing the location lies far beyond the limits of standard riding. "A 2-hour sprint," the desperate monarch answers. "Hop on my back when I change," he offered. Nodding, she paused. "Sire, I change as well. My speed won't drag us down." An unrecognizable emotion, perhaps shock or respect, flashed across his face before he transformed in a breathtaking, fearsome display. Skeletal structures snapped and contorted, while sinew rippled seamlessly, leaving an enormous dark beast crouching in the monarch's place. Changing proved tough for Ava, yet sheer panic fueled her transition. Shortly after, a petite, metallic-furred canine joined the sovereign's shadowy beast. The ensuing sprint was agonizing. His commanding stride swallowed the miles relentlessly and seamlessly, forcing her to strain beyond her ultimate physical limits. Despite searing breath and agonizing muscles, she matched his rhythm. Failure wasn't an option when someone lay dying. Craven awaited them right at the Sovereign's predicted riverside outpost, surrounded by surviving guards wearing utterly defeated scowls. The second-in-command rested completely still atop evergreen branches, his chest rising with alarmingly faint breaths. She reverted into her mortal body, ignoring her bare flesh amid the overwhelming panic. Mirroring her actions, the royal swiftly threw his heavy battle mantle over her shivering frame and guided her forward. "I'm unsure if he'll survive this," she murmured, while radiant magic ignited across her palms. These horrific gashes easily surpassed any injuries she had previously encountered. "Just attempt it," he commanded quietly, sitting close for an undeniably lengthy watch as the restorative magic dragged on forever. She channeled every ounce of mystical strength into the battered figure, combating the toxic metal incrementally while weaving shredded skin closed. Through the chaotic focus, his unwavering proximity kept her entirely grounded. Dropping from utter depletion, she watched the man's chest rise evenly as vibrant hues flooded his previously pallid complexion. Eradicating the toxicity completely sealed his severe lacerations, allowing pure vitality to pulse vigorously again. "It worked," the Sovereign rasped, overwhelming feelings choking his tone while he warmly grasped her fingers. "He's alive." Sitting amidst the early morning shadows, his massive palm enveloped hers as shared fatigue and profound solace made them both shudder. The tranquil atmosphere abruptly died when the injured man blinked awake. Rising dread consumed the second-in-command as he noticed his cured flesh, the radiant healer, and his nephew's defensive stance. Pure fury twisted his features once the realization finally hit. "What did you do?" he growled, fighting to rise. "What the hell happened?" "She pulled you from the brink," the royal answered evenly. "Your end was imminent." "Dying was my duty!" His tone broke with wrath. "My sacrifice would have ignited our army's bloodlust for the ultimate battle. Now you've weakened our entire pack by relying on some lowly wolf's impure magic." An eerie calm settled over the monarch. "So I must let family perish just to weaponize the pack's grief?" "Exactly." He scrambled upright. "True power and commanding respect demand such sacrifices." Lingering silence followed as amber irises analyzed the older male. "Understood," he eventually murmured. "Maybe you have a point. Maybe my edge is dulled." Looking her way, his gaze conveyed a silent, regretful plea. "Head back to the Citadel. We shall converse after you've regained your stamina." "But sire," she attempted, interrupted by his dismissive gesture. "Leave," he urged softly. "This conversation requires absolute privacy." While adjusting her massive coat for the grueling return sprint, she noticed the older wolf glaring intensely. Such visceral malice radiated from his icy stare that she reflexively retreated. Trouble was brewing. Within his warped perspective, her restorative magic felt like a dangerous plague, destroying his cherished traditions. Chapter 5. A strange, new atmosphere plagued the stronghold once the monarch arrived. Any previous joy rapidly vanished, substituting itself with oppressive scrutiny and hushed gossip as the beta prowled the halls like a starving beast. His frosty stare constantly hunted for vulnerabilities to obliterate. Nevertheless, patients continued visiting the clinic. Now acting exceedingly cautious, they constantly checked their surroundings before requesting medical aid, but their visits never stopped. Staff members nursing sprained joints, sentries hiding infected gashes, and culinary workers battling severe tremors all sought her mending touch. Curing them felt entirely hollow now. Previous cheerful appreciation had morphed into secretive sighs of comfort, paired with anxious blinking. 3 weeks had passed since she rescued the older male, yet the sovereign hadn't uttered a single word to her. She spots him occasionally, striding through the courtyard with his council, poring over documents in the grand hall, or sparring with his fighters. Yet those piercing amber eyes never drift her way, or even acknowledge she exists. It feels like their riverbank encounter, the gentle squeeze of his fingers, that heated gaze, was just an illusion. But she hasn't forgotten. That evening loops constantly in her head. Their frantic dash across the woods, how perfectly he kept up without uttering a single grievance. The countless hours he kept watch while she battled to pull his uncle from death's grip, recalling his firm, heated touch anchoring her in the dark. Above all, she cherishes how he wrapped his coat over her bare skin, his gestures remaining utterly reverent despite the frantic chaos. That heavy material paled in comparison to the immense depth of his tenderness, a recollection that sets her face aflame with emotions she is unable to identify. She is falling for him. This truth strikes her like a punch while observing him from the other side of the grand hall. He is plotting tactics with his commanders, projecting that signature commanding tone she recognizes so well, sending her pulse into a dizzying frenzy. It is entirely reckless and absurd. She is merely purchased property, yet her rebellious pulse blatantly ignores reality. A sudden rapping at her quarters sounds well past midnight, when the stronghold is dead quiet. Pulling it ajar, Ava discovers Craven lurking outside, his icy gaze catching the fiery glow. "The Sovereign requests your presence," he states bluntly. Her stomach flutters, only to violently drop. His inflection feels completely off, far too glacial, even for his typical malice. "Right now, sir? It is terribly late." "Immediately," he snaps, spinning around. "Come." They navigate unfamiliar passageways she has never explored. They head down rocky staircases, the air turning increasingly frigid and moist. The underground prison, she notes, panic setting in. Why summon her down here? "Does an inmate require medical attention?" she probes, fighting to maintain an even pitch. He remains utterly silent. The pair steps out into a round room surrounded by vacant cages. Multiple sentries linger in the darkness, their features concealed beneath metal masks. Yet nobody is wounded, and there is certainly no royalty present. "Sir," Ava murmurs hesitantly, pivoting toward him. "Where is the Alpha?" His resulting grin is razor thin. "He isn't showing up." Pure terror washes over her like freezing rain as the soldiers advance, gripping their arms. She is completely boxed in, like an animal snared. "You are vanishing this evening," the man remarks casually. "Perhaps a fatal mishap, or you might simply wander off and abandon your duties. Typical servant behavior." "Wait," she breathes, retreating into the cold masonry. "I am innocent. I just meant to assist." "Assist?" he snaps viciously. "You consider this rot helpful? You have turned everyone fragile, reliant, and pathetic. You are toxic, brat, a disease destined to ruin our entire empire." She finally spots the sheer lunacy in his stare, an unhinged conviction that refuses logic. He genuinely views her as a fatal hazard to his world. "I only wish to cure people." "Which is precisely why you bleed today." He charges, aiming straight for her windpipe. Ava shrieks. Her terrified cry bounces wildly throughout the cavernous dungeon. She attempts to slip away, but she is completely walled in. His hands clamp around her windpipe, applying a crushing, brutal force. Suddenly, absolute bedlam erupts in the room. The Alpha crashes through the doorway like divine retribution, his amber gaze burning with unholy wrath. Dust rains from above as he bellows, absorbing the nightmare before him. Ava choked against the masonry, soldiers closing in. "Release her instantly," he growls, infusing the command with absolute, bone-rattling dominance. The attacker lets go, though his expression remains entirely unapologetic. "She is a plague, nephew. Keep her breathing, and she takes us all down." "We discussed this," the sovereign replies in a deadly hush. "She remains. And I said that cannot happen." His uncle's facade shatters completely. "See how she has ruined you? Witness your own pathetic vulnerability. Rivals will sense it like a bleeding wound. Prudent tactics aren't frail." "It is pure lunacy," the older wolf spat. "She erased your true identity, your very nature. You lead the pack. Stop acting like a pathetic puppy pining for a lowly omega." Those accusations linger like an execution order. Ava flushes hotly with humiliation, mixed with either terrified optimism or sheer dread of her secret devotion being outed. "You've completely lost your mind," the alpha murmured, his voice deadly calm. "We're way past crossing the line." Craven scoffed. "Line? I built you from scratch. Your parents' pathetic nature nearly doomed you until I stepped in. I forged your power, handed you this crown, and you spit in my face?" He reached down, unsheathing a vicious, curved blade. That nasty, iridescent slick coating the metal triggered Ava's memory. Pure toxin. "Since you refuse to embrace your true destiny," Craven murmured, faking regret, "we need a change in management." Lunging abruptly, he drove the weapon right toward his nephew's chest. Yet the alpha's reflexes were unmatched. He seized the older man's arm, wrenching it until the weapon hit the ground. The ensuing brawl was an absolute nightmare. Mentor against protege, tearing into each other for blood. Their techniques mirrored perfectly, though the younger shifter possessed raw, unbridled vitality. This fight shouldn't have been close. That was before the security detail turned on him. "Glory to the rightful ruler!" one bellowed, swinging a whistling longsword. "For true power!" another screamed, thrusting steel toward the royal's back. 5 against 1, yet the alpha battled like a demon. His talons shredded tactical gear, launching massive soldiers across the room. The sheer numbers were overwhelming. Ava watched, paralyzed by panic, as dual blades sliced into his flesh. He stumbled, but held his ground, fierce golden irises burning with lethal intent. His violent wrath was breathtakingly gorgeous, terrifying, yet entirely hopeless. Suddenly, Craven loomed at his back, toxic blade raised high. "Behind you!" she screamed. Too late. The steel slipped flawlessly through a vulnerable seam in his tactical vest, piercing his side like a predetermined curse. Agony and sheer disbelief flooded his expression. Rather than collapsing, a monstrous darkness ignited within those amber irises. "Forgive me," Craven choked out, sounding fractured. "It shouldn't have come to this, but I refuse to let you ruin our entire legacy." Crimson bubbled past the alpha's mouth as he met the older shifter's stare. Time seemed to freeze between them, creator and destroyer, locked in a final look before the ruler's talons unsheathed with a metallic, scraping screech. "Likewise," he breathed out. With a seamless thrust, his hand buried deep into his uncle's torso, obliterating vital organs instantly. Craven's face mirrored that horrific surprise right before his spark flickered out completely. The dead man crashed onto the marble tiles, landing with a sickening, heavy smack. Drained by the fatal blow, the alpha staggered. He blacked out entirely, pitching forward right into Ava's desperate embrace. The venom was fast-acting. His complexion was already shifting to that familiar, ashen pallor she'd treated before. His breaths turned jagged and brutally shallow. His essence was fading fast, draining away uncontrollably. "Not happening," she choked out, her palms flaring with luminescent magic. "You are not leaving me. Not today." Yet despite flooding his veins with pure energy, she felt the terrifying inadequacy. Chapter 6. They immediately hauled the alpha up to his master's suite. Panicked staff members and remaining loyalists scrambled wildly down the sprawling estate's grand hallways. Ava kept her grip tight, channeling restorative magic constantly while they ascended the spiraling staircase. Upon breaching the bedroom doors, the entire compound already knew the truth. The king's uncle was a corpse. The ruler was fading fast, their whole world shattering. Still, Ava's focus remained locked on the muscular body resting atop the mattress. Her universe narrowed down to the faint, stuttering movement of his ribcage. That sickly gray tint devoured his complexion. Dropping to her knees, she slammed both palms against his heart, pushing her magical reserves past their limits. The metallic toxin aggressively pushed back, eating through her restorative aura like battery acid, destroying delicate fabric. Hours faded. Staff drifted in silently, dropping off ignored meals and untouched drinks. Meanwhile, Rowan locked down the entrance, his battle-worn features etched in deep distress. Yet Ava remained totally motionless, relentlessly fighting for his survival, because she was completely in love. Not with the brutal ruler everyone feared, but the actual person buried underneath. The guy who hauled her up a treacherous peak when her legs gave out, and stubbornly kept watch while she rescued his traitorous family member. She cherished his brutal power and unexpected softness. She adored how his gaze made her feel valued, like a priceless treasure, not just collateral. And now, he was slipping away. "Stay with me," she begged, her vision blurring with tears while battling the venom's vicious spread. "Don't go. We cannot survive without you." In response, the man's chest barely hitched, his oxygen intake dangerously faint. Her moniker shaped on his soundless mouth, repeating in a desperate, silent mantra. His lashes trembled, remaining firmly shut, stranded in the gray space preceding death. Bending near, she reassured him, "Right beside you. I am not going anywhere." A sudden gasp escaped him as his fingers instinctively jerked in her direction. Grasping his palm firmly, she channeled her remaining magical reserves into his body. Her soul intertwined with the radiant cure, a reckless bet risking dual destruction for his survival. At last, the toxic barrier shattered like a ruptured levee. Purifying magic surged through his veins, violently purging the metallic taint. Warmth flooded his pallid complexion as his lungs expanded fully. Completely drained, she slumped onto the mattress. Defying every probability, the Alpha survived. Early morning sunlight pierced the massive glass panes just as his lids fluttered apart. Disorientation clouded his expression while scanning the rafters, until he locked onto her. "Ava," he exhaled, the tone surprisingly robust and resolute. "Forgive me," she blurted out instantly. "I caused this entire disaster. Had I merely obeyed and kept quiet." "Hush." He laced their fingers together. "Never take responsibility for another man's actions." "However, sire," she argued, "I sowed chaos within your ranks and fractured your bloodline." "You delivered salvation," he countered, fighting to elevate his torso while she wept, vigorously rejecting the praise. "My presence killed your uncle." His preference for malice over salvation ended his life. The sovereign gently stroked her trembling hand. "I noticed everything recently," he confessed, "witnessing how deeply you cared for our community. Staff members actually beam. Pups giggle." He hesitated, amber irises studying her features intently. "Your views on pointless agony were accurate. That is not power, merely brutality masquerading as heritage. Both of us held on to our trauma, mistakenly believing it provided a protective shield. In reality, it only bred cowardice." "You fear nothing," she murmured softly. "I was petrified," he confessed, "scared of vulnerability, of repeating the fatal blunders that doomed my mother and father. Pure misery equates to nothing. True dominance means electing to mend rather than injure, constructing instead of destroying." Lifting his available palm, he cradled her jawline. "Your Majesty," she stammered. "Cain," he interrupted softly. "Call me Cain." Such raw vulnerability caused her lungs to stall. "I appreciate it," he murmured, "for rescuing me and redeeming this entire territory." Gathering her near, he embraced her with utmost tenderness. "Ava," he rumbled tenderly, "my relentless savior, my very soul." Their mouths met in a delicate, worshipful caress, treating her like fragile glass. Yet the moment she yielded, weaving her fingers through his midnight locks, he claimed her completely, kissing her with the frantic relief of a man who almost lost his universe. Epilogue. The changing season brought a total rebirth to the sprawling citadel. Former dirt sparring arenas had blossomed into lush botanical sanctuaries, filled with medicinal flora. Steel still chimed across the training yards, yet joyful cheers and supportive shouts replaced the grim silence. Fighters formerly conditioned for subjugation currently practiced defense, finally grasping that genuine power means shielding the innocent. Kane stalked among his brethren as a completely reborn alpha, his lethal aura entirely intact. In fact, his presence felt vastly superior, balanced perfectly by newfound prudence. Replacing terror with mutual honor, he watched as juvenile shifters stopped shrinking away from him. Rather, they approached him for advice, expecting both fortitude and grace. Even the ancient stone keep felt lighter. Melodies floated out of the previously mute dining pavilion, while toddlers romped down hallways that used to broadcast strict orders. The masonry itself radiated heat, implying their collective affection had permeated the stronghold's core bedrock. Under the luminous lunar peak, surrounded by the entire congregation, the king publicly claimed Ava's fingers. The formidable leader who previously equated empathy with frailty openly stared at her with pure adoration. "They dragged you here as a mere slave," his rumbling baritone echoed across the silent crowd. "Yet you liberated every one of us, proving that supremacy is measured by those we shield, not those we slaughter. You did more than mend our flesh. You salvaged our souls." Bathed in celestial glow, he claimed her neck. That tender nip sealed their immortal bond. Dark fur weaves with snow white as their inner beasts merge, raw power embracing pure grace, completely and finally whole. Thanks a million for tuning in. Fingers crossed you loved this magical ride. Once more, I am gifting 30 days of unlocked Patreon perks, featuring hidden tales, extra scenes, and a secret follow-up to this exact adventure. Drop your absolute favorite line down in the comments, and I will reveal our lucky winner during the upcoming upload. Fingers crossed.